which is not really the sound view.
There were times when I listened to a lot of people, even as Muslims, telling me which way to go, and I was a little bit confused because there were different messages. Because there was nothing in the Quran which told me that music is forbidden. It doesn't say music, thou shalt not play. I always took the safest path.
For Yusuf, the safe path meant abiding by a conservative Muslim view of music. If he was ever to perform again, he would use nothing more than his voice and percussion.
Eyes for Allah, nothing but Allah. Ba is the beginning of Bismillah.
In 1981, inspired by the birth of his first child, a little girl called Hassana, Yusuf Islam returned to writing. His first new work was a song called A is for Allah, a children's guide to Islam.
He's very, very concerned with the blossoming, if you like, of an Islamic Western culture. And the best place to be with that is within education.
Well, that's right. What's your name? No, you know who I am?
Yeah, I know. Islam.
Yes.
In 1983, Yusuf used his own money to create the UK's first all-Muslim school called Islamia.
I wasn't clever, I wasn't an academic, but I knew I had a job to do, and that was to teach my child, not only the academic aspects and general subjects, but how to live.
His work on behalf of Muslim children pushed Yusuf Islam back onto the front page, and he reluctantly became an unofficial spokesman for his new faith, a role he would soon pay a high price for.
Oh, I'm on my way, I know I am. Somewhere not so far from here.
By the mid-1980s, pop star Cat Stevens had vanished into the shadows. Now, Yusuf Islam emerged into the light. He worked tirelessly for Muslim causes around the world and was compelled to serve as a spokesman for the Islamic community. Yet the media viewed his every move with suspicion. Then in February 1989, he was drawn into a controversy which for a time would eclipse a decade of good deeds. When British author Salman Rushdie was about to publish his novel, The Satanic Verses, it caused an outrage in Muslim communities around the world. They alleged that the author committed blasphemy by insulting God and his prophets.
I was contacted by someone saying there's a book coming out, and will you join a petition to write to the publishers? And that's what we did, it was very simple.
The petition to stop the book's distribution failed. Then the already volatile situation was ignited. Iran's Islamic leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini, issued a judgment or a fatwa calling for the death of Salman Rushdie.
I found myself somehow being pushed up to the front of the vanguard of this kind of struggle, and being asked to comment.
Because our aim is an ideal society. I mean, if you take...
Within days of the controversy erupting, Yusuf Islam found himself in the hot seat, pressed to explain the Quran's position on blasphemy. Yusuf, a recent convert, said, like the Bible, the Quran states that blasphemy is a capital offense.
I'd done enough studying at that point to be able to actually sort of more or less quote, chapter and verse and the commentary of religious texts based on the Quran, of which there are different opinions. But I said, well, yeah, it says this. Next day, the headline read, Cat says kill Rushdie. And I was horrified.
The newspapers had it wrong. He never endorsed the fatwa on Rushdie's life.
I was simply a new Muslim who had stated something which I thought was quite simple. And if you were to ask a Bible student, what the Ten Commandments were, you would expect him to read that and you wouldn't blame him for that.
Appalled by the media's distortion of his comments, Yusuf immediately released a statement to clarify his position. It read, "That is not to say I am encouraging people to break the law or take it into their own hands. Far from it." It went on to say, "Under Islamic law, Muslims are bound to keep within the limits of the law of the country in which they live, providing that it does not restrict the freedom to worship and serve God and fulfill their basic religious duties."
I think I was a little bit naive many times. Perhaps I should have thought a little bit more before answering. But then again, you know, I was expecting that people had good intentions, but it's not like that.
In the end, few in the media paid attention to his attempts to set the record straight.
There are no words I can use, because the meaning still leaves for you to choose.
Yusuf Islam's reputation was seriously tarnished by the controversy. Some shops advised their customers to stop buying Cat Stevens records, and one American DJ even destroyed them.
Driving a steamroller over my records, and I thought, strange thing to do, you know. The most unfortunate thing about this whole episode was, I suppose, the way in which it separated me from my fans and from those people who had appreciated my words and my life and my journey.
He had to pay the price. From suddenly being the star, he had to become the anti-star as a result. He had to be the sort of reviled one almost. It just had to happen.
When I realized what was happening, I felt there was a time to get proactive. It became obvious that we can't just let others talk about what we believe.
Now, convinced he had to do something to promote a greater understanding of his faith, Yusuf decided to record once more.
His life ever shines as a symbol of light and guidance for all time and for all people.
In 1995, he released The Life of the Last Prophet, a CD of song and spoken word. The record told the story of God's messenger, Muhammad.
Muhammadur Rasulullah. I wanted someone who was coming from a Western background, who knew very little or nothing about this man, about this religion, to tell them in 1 hour what it's all about.
The experience was a turning point for Yusuf. Now he realized music still had a purpose. It could educate. It could serve his faith.
Oh, the white moon rose over us from the valley of Wada.
I think he was recognizing he'd been a bit too stiff, a bit too rigid in the past, and that you really had to take a much more fluid position. It's not all black and white. In many cases, music can have many, many positive effects. It can be very beautiful, it can be therapeutic, it can raise people's spirits.
And we owe it to show gratefulness where the call is to Allah.
If Yusuf had any question that music could again play an important role in his life, he would find his answer under the harshest of circumstances.
Fierce fighting has erupted in Bosnia. There is said to be an enormous number of casualties in Sarajevo.
In the early 90s, the world woke up, slowly and belatedly, to the brutal conflict that was being waged in the former Yugoslavia. The battle lines were drawn along ethnic and religious lines.
It's unimaginable to see how some human beings behave, you know, with blind prejudice. Here it was, you know, in the middle of Europe, the end of the 20th century, another genocide taking place.
Oh, they've killed all the little ones while they're